Wherever you are, this conversation is going to be an interesting one. And of course, I know that it's going to be an interesting one because it's a very sensitive conversation. And then I would like everybody to really pay attention. Of course, you can go to all of our social media platforms. You can make your comments. You can drop your comments because this conversation involves you, involves myself, it involves everyone in this country and the world at large. I mean, from statistics, we see that 1 in 3 women experience physical or sexual violence worldwide. And this is coming from the World Health Organization. So we want to talk about gender-based violence, how it has affected us, the people, not just the men, not just women as well, but men as well, yeah. Yes. And then we don't get to hear more conversation about how it affects men, but then of course it does affect men, and then we're here to give a voice to the voiceless. And in the studio with us is Lady Jane KaleuNdukwe. She's the founder, Genuine Womanhood Initiative Pathway to Nation Building. Good morning, Mom.
Good morning, Jason.
Good morning.
Thank you.
It is amazing to have you here.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming into the studio this morning.
Thank you for having me.
Now, so gender-based violence. I mean, to somebody who is just watching and is wondering what could be that, and somebody who has probably not experienced this thing, and then feels like, I don't think it's much more of a force like that. What do you have to say about gender-based violence?
Okay. So gender-based violence is any harm that comes to any gender. Now, usually it's the female gender, but we also know that men also face gender-based violence. So any harm that comes, and this could be physical, which most people know, hitting somebody, maiming the person. It could be sexual, which includes rape, molestation. It could also be emotional, you know, which includes isolation, you know, rejection, you know, things like that. And then psychological, you know, psychological when you are looking at talking down on someone, undermining the person, and causing the person to lose her self-esteem and confidence. Then we also have other issues such as female genital mutilation. We also have trafficking, human trafficking. Then there's also, I'm trying to think of the other one, but much of it has to do with control. You know, when there's an imbalance of power and not adequately recognizing the other gender for who she really is. Because why I'm saying she, because majority of cases, it's been the female gender. Yeah.
So what are the factors, or would I say social, because I know we will have some social factors, some cultural factors, some economic factors that might contribute to this persistence violence. Could you mention some of these factors that, you know, trigger violence or gender-based violence between the upcoming generation?
Okay. The first one I want to look at is culture and religion, you know, which is so embedded in our society, especially, I don't want to say African, you know, but I'm just going to use Nigeria, you know, as a case study. So we're so religious as a people, and we are so deep in culture. Now, I believe that culture should evolve, you know, because there are many things that have evolved, but this particular area of control doesn't seem to have evolved, you know. So, and it's so deep in our culture, you know, where the woman is seen as a second-class citizen, you know, and it starts from the home. You know, you have a male child, a female child. You know, you have cases where a woman has female children and she's still regarded as not having children. You know, and then some cases, I've heard cases where she's been sent away just because she didn't have a male child. Then when she has a male child, you know, the male child is revered. You know, so much is given. So the male child, right from inception, already sees himself as superior. So he looks down on the sister, you know, and he looks down on other females because already in his subconscious mind, he's thinking, I should be the king. Yeah, you can be the king, but she's also the queen. You know, so that is so deep in our culture. And when you speak with older people, you know, I mean, I remember in my own case, because I also suffered, you know, from gender-based violence.
Okay, could you narrate your ordeal?
Honestly, that is. I wanted to ask
We
that.
want to learn
Okay, wait.
and how you coped.
Before you continue your train of thought, I wanted to ask, what was the motivation for you to create the Genuine Womanhood Initiative? What was that experience you had that said, okay, no, I have to do this and I have to give a voice to the women?
Yeah. It was actually based on what I suffered. You know, I married a man who I loved, and I thought he loved me, but it wasn't that, you know, and I suffered many things, and I almost lost my life, you know. So I got to the point, mine was more of the emotional and psychological abuse. And people think that's, okay, that doesn't really matter so much. After all, we're not seeing bruises on your, you know, that doesn't mean I didn't have some of those, you know. So, but the thing is that it got to the point where I lost every sense of who I was. You know, I suffered depression. I used to walk with my head down, thinking that the whole world was better than me. You know, I remember sometime in England, somebody, an Englishman said to me, Jane, look up, you've done nothing wrong. I couldn't look people in the face. I always had to go down, you know, look down. You know, and I felt that the world was passing me by till the day I stood at the bridge in Manchester and I almost plunged in because I had been told several times that I was useless, you know, and what saved me was the fact that I saw my 2 children. They were really little, you know, beckoning on me, telling me that they needed me. It was an apparition. It wasn't real, you know, but you know, I could see them across that river and I was looking. That was the wake-up call that I needed, just to know that somebody needed me. Contrary to what I had been told on daily basis, that I was useless.
By your husband?
Yes.
Your experience
really
is something that eventually I'm going to try and have an interview with you that helps to explain this better. But I really do apologize for what you have to pass through. But that has made you the woman who you are today. But then again, we'll have a lot of people who are or have been in that situation, and some are no longer in that situation, but can't still move past
on.
what has happened. So I want to just ask, how did you move past it?
Right. What happened in my case was, first I went through counseling because I was so low. I lost the will to live, you know. So I passed through counseling, and it was in passing through counseling that I studied counseling, you know. So because while I studied counseling, I felt that I could help other women. So that's why in Genuine Womanhood Initiative, we champion self-awareness. Self-awareness, you know, because once you know who you are, then you can make choices that align with who you are. Because the problem most of us have is choosing superficially. And when you choose superficially, then be ready for consequences. You know, but when you choose a partner that aligns with your values, then you can have a sound relationship. That doesn't mean you wouldn't quarrel once in a while, but because of what unites the two of you, that is much more than what separates the two of you, then the relationship will survive. You know? So that's what we do. You know, because I realized that fighting religion, culture, it's deep. It will take forever, you know, to do that. But once a woman is guided into finding her true self, then she can make those choices that suit her well, you know, and then she can set healthy boundaries. I teach my daughter that. My daughter is very self-aware. I had to teach her that right from when she was little, because I said to her, You know, at that point, they were my daughter was just 2, my son was 5, so they were very young when this happened. You know, and I had to take over the role of father and mother in their lives. And I promised them. I said, because people said to me, you're still young, you can remarry. I said, no, I'm not doing that again, not now. I don't want my children to suffer more than they are already suffering. Because if I had done that, I would have had more children. And chances are that these other 2 would have been sidelined. And I didn't want that. So it was a sacrifice. I said, no, I'm going to be father and mother to both of you. I know I don't have the financial capacity, which is another thing that puts women in harm's way.
Economic factor.
Economic factor.
So, like, I'm still wondering, violence, other violence, and then gender-based violence. What's the difference between the gender-based violence? How does it differ from other violence? Or is it the same?
Violence is violence. You know, like I explained, we have the physical violence. You know, if you maim somebody, whether it's gender-based or whatever you want to call it, it's still violence. You know, whether it's 2 men fighting, that's violence. Because in the end, somebody has been wounded. You know? So, but this one that we're looking at, this gender-based violence, is the fact that these things happen so frequently in homes, and nobody says anything. You know, because they feel it's part of the marriage. I remember my late grandmother, you know, when I returned from England and somebody, you know, did something that I didn't like. And I said, no, I'm not having that. So she said to me, but that's part of marriage. That's part of a relationship. You know, the man has to beat you to order and control. This is coming from a woman. And then you have a lot of women that feel, you know, a little, that's it. It's part of it's necessary to put you in check. And that's wrong. That's a wrong mentality. But it will take so much, you know, to shift that mindset, not just in the men, but also in the women. You know, and I always say that if you see a queen in your woman, she would behave queenly. But if you see her as, well, she's just a nobody, you know, she's just good for bearing children, cleaning my house, making sure I'm okay and all that. That's all you will see in her. So if she tries to advise you, you wouldn't listen because you're looking at someone who is beneath you. But if you see her as a complementary partner to you, and that she has values and she has roles, you know, that she brings on board, then you would respect her. And she will respect you.
You spoke about culture and religion.
Yeah.
And of course, in as much as we want to try and, you know, beat round it and say, okay, because of advancement and everything, we still go online and we see people on Twitter say that, oh, I can't be with a guy who doesn't beat me, who doesn't do this and do that. And you'll be amazed. Like, anytime I see things like that, I'm wowed. Like, really? At this time and this age. But again, culture. Now, a lot of people have been rooted in culture.
Yeah.
How do we make that balance? Because in as much as we want to try and create awareness and give people the adequate knowledge to know that you're supposed to be treated like a queen because you're a queen. Now, how do we balance culture, which has been rooted into them, and the new, not even, I don't think it's even a new knowledge.
Yeah.
It is the right thing to do. How do we balance that so that we don't come about to disrespect and the husband doesn't feel all of that?
I feel that the cultural leaders, you know, the chiefs, the kings, they, you know, have a role to play, you know, and then even in families, you know, you'll be amazed that families that are, in quote, enlightened, you know, still have at the back of their minds that, well, as a woman, you don't inherit anything. Even though there's this inheritance bill that has said, okay, women can now inherit, you know, but there are still some that think, not really, you know, and it's, I'm sorry to say, but I seem to see that more in our Igbo tradition. Because I discussed this with someone from Benin, and he was shocked. He said to me that even before his father passed on, that he gave the choice property to the sisters. And I was like, what? You know? So you can imagine, cultures differ. You know, so these are things that it's going to take some doing, shifting that mindset. So not just for the men, even for the women, accepting to carry themselves with dignity and realizing that they actually do require that respect. But before you begin to call for respect, you also have to respect yourself, you know, and make better choices. Like I always say, you know, I talk about making value-based choices. Now, I know what I like. I know where I would not go to, you know, because I'm conscious of what I do. I'm conscious of the choices that I make. Now, there are certain places that if I go into and people begin to fight and something happens or goes wrong, then I will blame myself, you know? And then there are certain associations that I will not have. Because I can already see from the way the person is speaking that this is not going to serve me well. You know, that's about making healthy boundaries. But if you don't know things like that, for instance, if a woman decides, okay, I am only going to go with this man because he has money. You know, all I want is the money. So be ready for the consequences. We just have to tell ourselves the truth. You know, because I'm not a one-sided kind of person. I have a son, you know, and I wouldn't want him, like I taught him right from get-go. I said to him, you have to be a gentleman. You know, if you want a sound relationship, learn to listen. Pay attention. You know, don't think that you know it all and she has no right to say anything. You know, but in the same way as the woman is giving that advice, she is also not to lord it over the man. You see the balance we're talking about, exactly. You know, so that way, because of her courage, because of everything that she represents, you know, and then she's able to say, I think, you know, I'm just, you know, this thing you shared with me, this is how I feel on my inside. Because of the woman's intuition. Men also have it, you know, but it's much more on the woman's side. So when the woman is able to share that and the man says, I don't want to listen, she keeps quiet, you know? And then when he experiences something that is not so pleasant, next time he would listen. So we don't need to lord it over. That is why we teach the true concept of womanhood, you know? Understand who the woman really is. The woman is meant to be the torch bearer, you know, the beacon that is shining light in darkness, bringing solutions, you know. So now if she's making sure that no one misses their steps, she's the inspirer, you know. So now you begin, she's the nurturer. There's so much to the woman, only because we do not know this. And that's why we think, oh, she's a second-class citizen. She's the weaker sex, as people say in the Bible. But she's not, you know, because the neck carries the head. Definitely. If the neck doesn't move, the head cannot move.
Yeah, exactly.
You see the thing? So until we recognize the true concept of womanhood, you know, both for the men, I've had classes like this where men sat in and they listened. And one man said to me, oh, I'm so glad I heard this. I didn't know. From now on, I'm going to respect women. You know? So if the man says, I'm going to respect, then the woman must carry herself with dignity, realizing that she has a vital role to play, not just in the home front, but also in nation building. Because everything starts from the home. So if she's able to raise the children well, they represent her well in the school. They represent her well in the society. The husband, who is maybe a politician or something, you know, is able to make choices that will benefit all. But
I'm just trying to go back to, to learn more from your experience, because I know a lot of people, a lot of women, even some men, especially women, when they want to speak out, there is this thing like you're not supposed to speak out, your voice should not be heard, and all of that. And even to subject them to this stage where they think, like you said, is a norm. I mean that's respect, that's submission to your husband. I'm wondering, during your case, how were you able to, you talked about counseling, but before counseling, because I know a lot of women don't even go for counseling, they don't want to go
they
for
go
counseling.
for, yes.
So before counseling, at what stage did you realize that, no, this is not me anymore, I have to seek for help? I need to know that particular stage, you took that decision.
At that point, like I told you, I had lost the will to live. If I had plunged into that river, that would have been the end of me. Now, when I saw that my children needed me, it became a wake-up call. And I began praying for help, And it was in that praying for help that help came my way. I was at the YMCA at Barnsley, and just chatting with people, Then somebody came in and said, the government is giving free education to asylum seekers, refugees, and all that, And I said, oh, okay. But they only have a few courses, and counseling happened to be one of them. So I said, okay, I'm going to Barnsley College. Let me see if I can qualify. And that's how that came. And then I was now directed to counseling. I was receiving counseling, and I began finding myself. But this thing you're saying about this culture of silence is also another problem. It's another huge challenge, because when you're passing through abuse, sometimes family members, they don't want to know, because it's like, please don't bring shame to our family. What would we tell people if you break out from this marriage? What are we going to say? That is more important to them than your life. They're looking for how to patch it or mend it or cover it
all.
And ask you to manage.
I remember going to the church when I was crying out for help. And I said to the pastor, please, I need help. I need help. The pastor was busy talking about the program he wanted to do, this, that. I kept following him. Do you know what he said to me? He said, woman, go and be submissive to your husband. Tears. I said, how much more submission am I to give to be treated as a human being? And that was it.
But I figured out, maybe because you're educated, you're able to, know what to do, even know who to run to.
Yeah.
Well, I'm looking at a situation whereby some women out there, they're not educated, they're illiterate. And how do you think they can be able to, come out from that position where they will seek for help to start with?
Awareness. You create awareness, but at the end of the day, it's only the one that wants to be helped that will be helped, because I've also heard women, when you're talking to them, there was this August meeting where I spoke about gender-based violence. The women, they were enlightened. They were not uneducated. They said to me, yes, we experienced that, but we don't want to lose our marriages. What would we say? What would we tell people? What would people think of us? Educated, lawyers, different professions. And they were telling me, well, it's happening. What can we do? I want the marriage. I have to stay in a marriage.
Yes, so, this you're saying, very important, because I've seen it. I want to go into media a little bit. That's movies, Western movies. And then you see, if you watch House of Cards, the husband was a politician, just like you said, and then the woman was into non-NGO, and then it was more about humanitarian. And then she knew that the husband was cheating. But then she stayed and covered it up and everything. Now, that kind of sends a message to young women out there. Do you think that the media as well give or paint those pictures where it is okay?
Well, media painting a picture such as that is actually a reality. It's not that it's okay, but it's a reality. You know, it's happening. Because I always ask, you know, sometimes you hear, oh, so-and-so was arrested for gender-based violence. When you dig deep, the person is coming from some lowly background, you know, and I ask myself, is that only for the poor or for the uneducated? You know, are we trying to say that gender-based violence is not being experienced by the rich? You know, many of the big homes that we know are experiencing, but they don't want to say anything. Just over the weekend, I received a call, you know, saying that a woman had been locked up and prevented, you know, from seeing her baby and all sorts of things and, you know, being abused and everything. And I said, my goodness, I can't keep quiet. I quickly called someone, you know, who is also into advocating for this gender-based violence awareness. And then she called this woman, this young woman. Then shortly afterwards, she called me back. She said, we were about to go and visit her. And she now said we should wait, that the family and friends want to sort it out. This person saying they want to sort it out, a few weeks back, was covered in bruises and all sorts of things. And I said to myself, well, there's so much you can do.
How do you collaborate with police and all these other agencies, you know, to protect women as well? Because I understand that in as much as you want to proffer help to people, so people can still refuse help. But then again, I don't think we have much of a choice than to still help them, because there are some cases where you just say no, I think we should take you out, because some of them have been mentally abused to the point, subjected to the point where they feel like this is fine. They don't even know what is right or wrong. So how do you partner with police agencies or different bodies to bring out such people from those bondage?
It's still, at the end of the day, you just cannot go and yank a woman out of her home if she doesn't want to go. You know, it's huge. Now, even with the police, now, yes, some of them are now becoming more sensitive to that. But prior to that, it was like, what are you talking about? That the husband, he just tapped you. Is that why you're here?
The police are men as well.
Do you understand what I mean? You know, and then he is probably doing the same tapping to his wife, you know, and then he's thinking to himself, what is that? You know, I mean, a pastor's wife told me one Sunday, she said, I'm not going to church after this man has beaten me and done all sorts of things. And that's the same pastor that another woman runs to. Please help me, pastor. You know, my husband is beating me. And he says, what do you think he's going to do when he is doing the same to his wife? So that is why I looked at all those things and I said, the best thing I can do for any woman is to help her find herself.
Okay, in finding herself and helping her to find herself, I want to know, what exactly does she need to do when she is, you know, violated, when she's abused by the opposite gender? What exactly is she? Because when you say women should, you know, stand up and speak out, and some people think it's all about standing up and fighting the man. So you beat me, I beat you. Tie rapper me, I tie rapper. I will know who will beat each other in this house. So what exactly does it mean, you know, for them to speak out, for them to stand up? What are they supposed to do in that situation?
Well, like I keep saying, you know, my mission is not to break up homes, you know, and you have to also realize that a home should be a sanctuary. So if it's not a sanctuary and a battlefield, then you don't have a home, you know, and that decision is still the woman's decision. It's a huge responsibility to take on another woman's issue and say, I advise you to come out. Then tomorrow she comes and you're the one that scattered my home. Do you understand what I mean? Exactly. So, but when she now knows, I've had enough, I can't deal with this anymore. You know, and she says, please, let's call it quits. You know, I respect my husband, my ex-husband. He will still remain the father of my children. You know, and whatever thing that the children are doing and they need his help or whatever it is, we accord him that respect. You know, so it's not a question of we're now some battlefield where, okay, you know, so since we're no longer living together, you know, we've drawn the battle line. No, because it affects the children.
Permit me to dig deep. Now, when it comes to children, I know that's the major reason most women stay. If you ask 100 women, go a survey and ask 100 women, why are you still in that marriage? They say because of the children. Now, in your own case that you had to leave, how were you able to manage the children in the sense that, did you tell them your experience, or how were you able to protect them from that information?
In my own case, I was sent out. I wasn't even the one running now. I was sent out with my children, you know, and then I was begging because of that economic factor, you know. So it was like, yes, I know I'm not loving this. This was even before it got very bad, to the extent where I now had to just, you know, it's not easy. Breaking off a marriage, you know, especially where you have children. He would come back, you know, okay, let's see. And then you're saying, let us see. You keep backwards and forward until you now say, enough is enough. You know, so that was what my own case was, you know. And then for the children, they were very little. They didn't really understand, especially my son couldn't understand what was going on, you know. And there was this resentment towards me because it was like, what are you doing? You know, my father, my this, he couldn't understand that, you know. Then my daughter was thinking, is it because of me that you two quarreled? Can you see that? So, but it was as they grew up, they began to understand. It took a lot, especially for my son, because he aligned with his father. He couldn't understand what I was talking about until he began experiencing certain things. Then he said, is that what you were trying to say? You know? So it's not easy. And you don't get the children to turn against their father. They would see it for themselves eventually. Because when you try to get them to turn against him, eventually they'll turn against you.
Okay.
How were you able to, how were you, you know, foreseen in the society after what happened, after your experience? How do, you know, the society, how does it see you? How does it present you? Does it still give you the opportunities you had being married? Does it still accord you the respect you had?
And how did you manage it?
Aha. Now, if it's with regards to respect, I teach respect. I'm an embodiment of respect, you know. That's, I teach etiquette, I teach respect. So I carry myself with dignity. If I didn't speak about this, many people would not know. Apart from those that have read my book, The Grapevine of Life, which is where, yes,
you wrote a book.
I wrote a book. I've written books. You know, this was where I spoke about, you know, about my journey to self-discovery. You know, other than that, you wouldn't know. Most people feel that I'm still married because of the way I carry myself. You know, it's not that people have not propositioned me, but I'm not interested because I chose that for myself. Other women may not choose that, but I felt, no, I want to give my children values. I don't want the stereotype of, okay, you come from a single home, so for that reason, you know, you must be wayward. No. My children, people, they work in Lagos, and people have said to them, you were well brought up. You know, and I like that. That's a huge testimonial for me. You know, because it can be done. But you just have to tell yourself, no, the fact that this has happened. And another thing, you will find some women, they enter into relationships on a rebound. I can't stay by myself. I've read cases where somebody, how will I cope with school fees? How will I cope with this? I said to my children, even if it is Gary, we will drink it like that. One day things would get better.
So let's talk about the men.
Yeah.
You know, this is gender-based. Let's talk about the violence, the abuse of men. How do you see abuse, you know, of men in the society, and how do you think they too can cope?
You know, I would like to see more men helped. Yeah. You know, I'm a very balanced person because I have also seen where men are being abused by women, and it's painful. You know, I go down on my knees and I pray and I say, God, please, do not let my son, you know, get into any relationship where the power imbalance is the woman is the one that has all the money and has all the power, and then I don't want that. I can't take that, you know. So I've seen, and the thing is that being a man, you know, you're not expected to see, and then how do you now come out and say that the woman has been beating you in the house, you know, and things like that.
Yeah.
But those things happen, you know, and they need, men are human beings too.
Yes, we are.
Yeah. You know, they need, I mean, the fact that...
Yeah.
But yes, they are human beings. The fact that a man maybe is beating the woman and whatever it is, there are some good men. You cannot say all of them are bad. The same way you cannot say all the women are bad. You know? So more has to be said about gender-based violence against the man. You would see, I've heard some young men talk about how they were introduced, I don't know if I can use the word, you know, sexual acts by women. That's an abuse at a very young age.
Yes, yes, yes.
That's an abuse.
Okay, now, in the good book, of course we're Christians, so I can say in the Bible, I think Hosea was saying that my people are in bondage. Now, not Isaiah rather, said my people are in bondage because they lack knowledge. How can we begin to teach people about this gender-based violence, both for men and for women? And how can we build a society and a community that can accept when men communicate and when women complain?
I think where the best way to start this, you know, is to go to the churches, the religion, whether the churches, the mosques, whatever it is. Because a lot of us, like I said before, are so religious. What the pastor says, what the imam says is
Fine.
So if they can accept to champion this fight against gender-based violence, a lot of people will be reached. The same with culture. You know, we have always done it like this. Women are, you know, you can imagine that even in the workplace, you know, a woman maybe is heading a department, and then there are some men, you know, under her in that department, and she gives an instruction, and they're looking at her like, did anybody speak? That is another form of gender-based violence.
And if she's stern, they say she's abusive, she's disrespectful.
You know? Okay, so they call all sorts of things. So there are areas that we need to really tackle. You know, go into the religious backgrounds, begin that awareness. Let the religious leaders commit to this fight against gender, or else we're just talking and talking and talking and nothing is happening. The same with culture, you know, and then even in the workplaces, begin to call out some people, you know, because you can have an employer, you know, who is molesting the employees, but nothing is being said. If you talk, that's you and your job gone. So, but if some big fellow is called out, I think some people will now sit back. Because it's not just for the poor man that is committing gender-based violence. People at the top are doing it. You know?
And sometimes they're even worse than...
Most times.
Okay, so now, of course, when we advise people to speak out and they come out with the economic challenges that they're going to have, how am I going to survive? Where am I even going to stay? Some are lucky, would I even say lucky? Some are, in a way, the husband says, leave the children. You just just leave. So now, how do we and how does government policy, how can government policy come in creating a shelter for people like this so that just in case they can have a place to go and, you know, lay low and find solace?
It's very important. I mean, in the Western world, they have shelters. If any case of abuse is reported, immediately the woman is taken to a place of shelter, you know, where that information is not given out, because the man can still trace her to that place and then continues, you know. So that has to be done, you know, and we as a people have to understand that this case of gender-based violence is actually a huge problem. You know, you can imagine if somebody, maybe this is the place of shelter, and then somebody working there receives money. Okay, your wife is here. Did you know that, you know? So what are we? Do you understand the real whistleblower? So, you know, it's tough. Yes. It really is tough.
Okay, so because of time, how can the healthcare professionals help as well? I mean, they are the first, especially when they get to the hospitals too. So how can they help as well?
Very much. Because once there's a case of sexual violence, you know, the woman, assuming there's a report to the police, the first point of call is the hospital to ascertain that that rape was actually committed. And a formal report is made by the hospital to the police. And then the matter is taken to court. I mean, that is ideal. That's the way it should be, you know. But you see, when the woman has been raped, she feels dirty. She runs to the house. She cleans, washes, and continues washing and washing and washing, you know, and never speaks out because she's ashamed. And, you know, there's another thing that some men do. You know, when a woman rejects their advances, oh, I'm going to show you. And he knows that the only way to get that woman is to violate her sexually. And that is so wrong. How people can think like that. You know, and then when that happens, she is too ashamed to say anything. Because who would believe her? You know, then they now tell you, could it be the way you were dressed? Could it be that you just went there, you know, and called for it? You know? Oh, my goodness. The abuse continues.
Guys, don't forget, you can go to all of our social media platforms to make your comments, ask your questions. Of course, we want to answer them, and we would send them across to her, and she would answer and send them back to you as well. Don't be ashamed to say anything. Please, before we let you go, what's your advice to both women and men out there suffering and can't say anything, that would watch this video and say, this woman might not understand what I'm passing through?
You just have to tell yourself the truth. You know, because you're the only one that can make yourself happy. You're the only one that knows what is best for you. You know, because at the end of the day, it's your life. When you make the right choice, because sometimes we send ourselves into self-imprisonment because of the choices that we have made, you know. So we're not saying, okay, go and break up the marriage. No, it's not easy. Sitting here, I know what I suffered. You know, having to raise my 2 children. I know what, we suffered hunger, we suffered many things. We even suffered more abuse, you know. So it's not easy. And then that is the fear, when you know that there is no support. Because in other Western worlds, in the Western world, they would have a place of shelter. Then there's also some kind of welfare being given to cushion things. But here there's no welfare, you know. And then God help you if your family doesn't even support you. So you're just there by yourself, literally begging if your children are very little. So when women think of all those things, they say, let me stay. You know, let me stay. Maybe let these children grow up. Let him keep at least paying fees, if he's paying fees, you know, for them to grow up. I will suffer all the things. I've heard women say that, and you can't blame them because we don't have a system of support.
But what can they do personally, independently, you know, to help? What advice would you give them personally?
Well, try to make it work if you can. If you can. You know, if there's a way of, I don't know what could be causing, you know, the rift between partners, you know, if there is something that you can do to make it work, make it work. But if it doesn't work, if you have tried all else, then tell yourself the truth. You wouldn't die. You would suffer a bit, but you will survive.
You will survive. You're really a strong woman and inspiration to a lot of women out there. Thank you very much, Lady Jane KaleuNdukwe, founder Genuine Womanhood Initiative, Pathway to Nation Building. And you've got, from what you've seen, she is building the nation. And it starts with the woman.
Of course.
Josh,
I'm a strongly believer of women being, and I honestly believe that if women are more in our government, things will be different. Because I know that women are people, just like you said, they are more intuitive. They use both sides of their brain. And men, of course, like you're thinking we can't multitask that much. So allow women rule a bit and let's see a difference. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your time.
You're welcome. Thank you.